Welcome to Beyond the Bottom Line, the podcast where founders and business owners get in-depth insights and actionable takeaways from industry experts. We're here to help maximize your revenue, streamline your operations, and keep more of your hard-earned money. Now here's your host, Miguel Alexander Centeno.
Thanks for joining. I'm Miguel, founder and CEO of Centurion Firm, where I have the honor of leading a small tax strategy team serving businesses just like yours. And the cool thing about what I get to do is I get to work with businesses who are doing much cooler things. I do a deep dive with clients, mentors, and businesses I admire about their world, how they think about the area that they're an expert in, and we dive into how you as a business owner or operator can learn from the best. We're really excited about the conversation we're going to have about strategic development. We'll share a little bit about our journey, and you'll hear from two amazing people that we work with over at CodingIT. I'm excited to welcome Pablo, not only my friend, but the co-founder and head of CodingIT. He brings deep experience in software development and product strategy. Today, he's leading up CodingIT, and I'm excited for everyone to hear more about him. Pablo, great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Miguel.
Chester McLaughlin, he's the engineering manager here at CodingIT. Chester leads high-performing teams over at CodingIT and helps companies turn complex challenges into scalable solutions. Chester, great to have you on as well.
Thanks so much, Miguel.
Yeah, of course. Full disclosure, CodingIT is a client of ours from the tax side. So we really thought it'd be awesome to bring some of the things that we've worked through to the table here so we can talk about how to build a strategic roadmap and also have some tax credits to claim. So on our side, we also have Ishan. Ishan, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, hi, I'm Ishan. I lead the specialty tax team at TaxSide, and my main focus is R&D credits, so you'll hear from me in a little bit.
And if you are an R&D client, you would have worked through our own proprietary platform, which we'll talk about more so in the sense of what our pain points were, but that has CodingIT's fingerprints all over it. Let's start off with the question of what are the benefits of adding technology inside your company? Obviously, there's companies that just do tech, but I think, Chester, I wanted to hear your take on maybe kind of a broader question of what are the benefits of building technology?
Absolutely. The way we think of it at CodingIT is that we help our partners invest in themselves through custom software. We like to work long-term to identify, architect, and implement. Kind of the triad that I have in mind is the tools, the processes, and then the automations that actually deliver strategic business outcomes. Why do we believe that technology is necessary to deliver these strategic business outcomes? Well, it's kind of blindingly obvious these days, right? We've watched technology change the fabric of everything. And so it's really about how you run your business. It has to involve custom software. And that's what we love to get involved in. To really understand that, you need to look at how culture, technology, and economics affects your business and how custom software can help you adapt and intentionally change towards a better fit with culture, technology, and economics.
I think it's important because I think the alternative of building a hodgepodge of, N+1 off-the-shelf solutions gets really tricky. That's what we went through.
Yeah. And that kind of exploration of hodgepodge solutions, like you said, is kind of a byproduct of a growth mindset where people just want to grow. But that's kind of a broken organic metaphor. We like to talk about intentional change. So how do we identify the things we want to change, and how do we use tools, processes, and automations to get you there?
Yeah, I mean, I think in our case, we could have used 5 different systems or build our own. So it was a no-brainer to start building it. Is there anything else you wanted to add there? Because I did want to ask about, kind of your process on where to apply technology.
Yeah, that we're going to get into more specific questions later, I think, about exactly how to identify where. I do believe you have to have a solid foundation conceptually with your business strategy, with your operations, so that you can layer on advanced technology. And so people talk about wanting, whether it's an R&D tax credit as an advanced business strategy for getting tax credits, whether you talk about AI and you want to integrate that into something, you can't just Band-Aid that on. And you can, right? But it's short-term gains. And so we really like to look at whether it's on the operations side, on the financial side, or on the technology side, how can we integrate tools into an already established foundation? And so we really take a holistic approach. So you say where to implement technology. I don't like to just slap it on top. We like to think about integrating it into the fabric of your business.
Yeah. And one of the things I think you brought up before is that when you work with businesses, you're helping them think through where technology is going to be most useful. How do you guide business owners that are kind of domain experts in their own space? They have an idea of, I think, what they want to build. How do you help them kind of understand where they really need to start?
We have processes for that we can talk through, but really education is important. It's teachability. We need business owners to be both our teacher and our student. We need to learn from their domain knowledge. They are experts. They either bootstrapped, bought, or otherwise built their business. And we need to learn what works and why it works so that we can translate that into technology. But they also need to be students. We need to teach them the implications of the technology decisions that are being made. People talk about stack selection or, this framework or that framework or this cloud provider, that cloud provider. There's implications to your business from every single technology decision. And a good technology partner is someone who can articulate the implications of technology decisions to your business concerns.
So tell me a little bit about the process of what you consider before you automate something in a business.
Yeah. So on automation specifically, I consider it a 100% problem. You have to solve 100%. You can't automate something halfway. And so typically what that means is you just redefine the problem. And what you do is it gives you confidence that you can test the solution, that you can rely on the solution, and that you understand what the automation outputs and it does it consistently. And so the pitfall is a lot of people trying to automate too generic or too rough of a process. They've been doing it as humans, and it makes sense as a human because they bring their human flexibility and their human intuition to it. And they think, oh yeah, we can automate this. So I work really hard to push back on that and say, no, we have to automate something to be bulletproof. This has to run consistently every single time. Otherwise you lose trust and it becomes another wasted effort.
Yeah. I know we'll talk about it in a bit, but I suppose it's really important to have things defined before you automate. Because I've even realized in our own processes that maybe we had spaces or gaps in the process where people were making decisions and it wasn't always the same. We couldn't automate it until we actually made a decision and defined what was going to happen in that step. So it's a difficult problem. I think it's very, very helpful to understand, like you were saying earlier. It's helpful to understand as a business owner that's not a technologist why it's so important, and I've learned that refactoring can be a bad word, right? If you kind of engineer things wrong or you develop it because V1 is very limited and, oh, wait, V2 is going to change the whole system. So, I mean, yeah, I think it's spot on to say that, in today's age, we all need to be learning how not to screw up the tech that we're building.
Absolutely. And that starts with trusting your instincts, but never trusting your assumptions.
Let's talk about the discovery process, because I want to know a little more about how you guys kind of enter maybe a business that you're not too familiar with, and how do you find where you're going to build the roadmap? And Pablo, I wanted to ask you that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to chime in there. I think that, just was talking about where to add technology. And I think you brought a great point, Miguel, saying you have to have your process already defined in order to apply technology, right? So I think that is the best case scenario, So it's not just coming with an idea. You already have established process. You are already a business owner, but you are not prepared to scale. So, and that the question is, how you're going to translate these pain points and how you're going to be able to identify these core business problems, right? And if you remember, so we were building this all your custom platform that you already have in place in order to support hundreds of clients right now. But if you remember, like a couple of years ago, you had a bunch of spreadsheets, different software as a service platforms where you were using like I don't want to mention, but project management tools like Monday.com or Asana, and trying to integrate those tools into your matrix calculation and all the tags and specifics for your customers and so on. And also the problem was on how to collect all the data from the clients, so there were like several problems there. So the first thing that we have a methodology to identify all these problems. So you come with the problems, but we have to structure those problems in order to see how we are going to be developing technology that where the ultimate goal is going to be adding value. So first thing is identify that core problem, the second thing is like based on that core problem is identify validate ROI. I think that it doesn't make any sense to develop something that where you are not gonna be able to see the impact on the revenue or in the cost structure of your company and so on. And in the case, for example, using the tax hack example, so with that platform, you not just added an asset on the balance sheet, but also you had the platform, in order to scale without scaling massively your payrolls, right? So that was the key point there.
I'm just going to chime in to say I think it was better than that because previously we had to have, like a senior associate work on all these engagements that, maybe they had a master's in finance. Very, very top person had to work on it. And now I think we can hire someone more junior who's very efficient. They still have to be very good project managers. But obviously we get the oversight of someone really smart, but the person doing the work is moving our clients through a system. So it's super efficient and it changes how we scale and who we hire.
Exactly. And just to add one more point there, you're saying, hey, now we're changing what are going to be the skills that our team is going to need in order to run our processes. That is one of the bullet points. So we needed to understand in our end, what could be the users of the platform, what were their roles, how they were interacting with stakeholders and so on, and understanding first, hey, what is the expected outcomes if we're gonna be building a custom platform. Yeah, and the last one is prioritize what to build first. So every company, I think, they establish. We have like different kind of clients, but we have like non-technical founders, like TaxSense, for example, and technical founders. And non-technical founders, they come with a bunch of problems, with a bunch of things that they could make more efficient, and the first thing that we should decide is what kind of features or functionalities on the platforms are going to generate the most benefits, right? And that is super important as well. If not, you can develop a bunch of features, that are not going to be impact on the outcomes, on the ROI, on the business, So we try to think about like business outcomes and not like features by itself. And this is the first part of the discovery process, but the second phase, once we understand the problems, we understand where the data is coming from and all these kind of things, we should translate that on a design, right? And there it's like I really like to say like you really need like to find like different kind of profiles in order to run that discovery phase. Is defining user flows. In the case of tax hack, if you remember at that point was, hey, who are the stakeholders, so probably clients of TaxHack were interacting with your team, so your team with interacting with the CFOs, the CFO with the CTO, the CTO with probably with engineers and so on. So understand how is the workflows allows us to translate that in requirements, right? And these requirements in probably in a Figma file, So we should define what the system is gonna be, And that's what I mean by that is like we need to define the design.
Something you mentioned that always surprises me. Now it doesn't surprise me is how much work goes into user management and assignment.
About
Like, it's something that I didn't appreciate earlier on. And then as we scale, we're like, wait, we need staff to have different user rights. And then clients might add their controller, but the controller doesn't know the technologies in the system. So it's like, all of a sudden you end up with like user groups and permissions. And so I think that's really important to do upfront as well.
That's completely a great point. And I think that, yeah, and these user roles are going to be evolving during time as well. So all the custom platform, and I think the non-technical founders should understand that the platform is going to be evolving as well. So probably this user management that you had when you started with an MVP or with an initial product, it's not going to be the same like in year 2 or whatever. But coming back here to the to discovery phase, I think that another important thing that you should define when you start is the appropriate tech stack or technology stack. So understanding how many users the platform is going to have allows you to define if you want to go like cheaper, if you want to go like a little bit more expensive, but more scalable in the future, right? So you have to define based on pros and cons, and I think that there you can make like big mistakes, So something that you define here in the discovery phase, if you do it in the wrong way, it's going to impact like the cost in the long run. And I think that when you finish the discovery process, you are ready to start the development execution in an iterative way.
You were talking about validating ROI. At what point in the discovery process are you validating the return on investment, or does that not happen yet?
I have an example in my mind right now where it doesn't make any sense to proceed with custom software, But if you remember our conversation with TaxHack, we were at that point we were talking about like what could be not the ROI specifically. Sometimes you don't know exactly when the money is going to come back, right? So sometimes you just need to trust that you're going to be able to scale. But if you make your math, you feel you can serve like 100 more clients with the same platform, without like hiring, massively like your payrolls, it's easy to do, but you have to validate that as well. It's not just developing software because you want to develop software, you want to add technology. So the main reason shouldn't be like recorded taxes, or apply the R&D tax credit. Should be, I think that this innovation should be useful by itself. That's what I mean, if that makes sense for you.
Okay. Yeah. And if I could chime in, the question of timing, I definitely think from the beginning, a lot of people, when they approach us, they think that estimation has to come first, that you can't judge the return on the investment until you know the investment. And I push back on that and say that you have to conceptually scope the problem and conceptually understand what the value of solving the problem is first. And that's how you even know what stratosphere of software you want to go into. Are you going full enterprise? Are you doing a quick solution?
Mm-hmm.
So you need to understand, like Pablo said, the foundational value to your business of solving this problem. And then you can align that with an appropriate software solution.
That's really good, guys. And tell me, Pablo, is there more to the discovery? Because I want to start moving into how do you take discovery and move it into the roadmap?
Indeed, I think that we are already there. It's like a kind of a mix, because I think that, it's about like, hey, once you have found the pain points, know what, and I think that Jessica can talk more about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's continuing the conversation because we have processes that guide projects through these phases, but the way we think about it is not segmented into these discrete processes. We're always thinking one step ahead, and we're recalling what happened from the beginning. And so that's why I say that assessing the ROI is a constant effort, that you're always looking at the objectives and the outcomes that we've set out and asking, do these features align? So when you're done with discovery and you haven't enough that you've identified something that's worth doing, and you're ready to start taking action on it, I think one of the concepts that people don't articulate clearly is, what is it? What are we building?
Hmm.
Are we building a full, final, scalable enterprise solution? Are we building a example to take to investors? Are we building a quick tool to see if the humans in the process can adapt to a new way?
Mhm.
And So there's lots of terminology that is thrown around. And so I just want to introduce a couple of terms the way that we use them at CodingIT a lot, because I think this clarifies the it. What is it that we're building? The dichotomy that we have to consider is there's conceptual things and then there's technical things. And so if I use the term tracer bullet as, does it technically work? And so like a gun that shoots a bullet and has those phosphorus tracer bullets, you can see where the bullet goes. That's like, can you hit a target? Can you do one technical thing? On the conceptual side, it's a proof of concept. And so whatever the technology is, does the concept itself work? It's a very focused, refined concept. And so here we can see that the tracer bullet is how technically we prove that a specific thing works. A proof of concept proves that the specific idea works. So once you collect a couple of those, you can move on to what I consider the steel thread on the technology side and the prototype on the concept side. So the steel thread is, can you connect those 2 points with a physical technology solution? Like just a minimal thread of steel. Can you do that? And that's for the technology. On the concept, it's a prototype. Does this iteration produce the expected experience? And so as you kind of use tracer bullets and steel threads technically, you can use proof of concepts and prototypes conceptually. All of that leads to an MVP, which integrates all the concerns. Will real users actually adopt this? And will you get that return on investment?
Can you give me an example of a proof of concept you worked on or didn't make it up?
Yeah, absolutely. So a proof of concept is trying to address the conceptual gap. And so oftentimes with interfaces, it's a good way to show that the concept is valid. And so if you believe that, let's say a mapping system that helps a dispatch, we've worked on some dispatch systems. And so you want to prove that the ability to visually demonstrate the distance between dispatched vehicles is that visually seeing the distance is better than a table, right? And so you're going to prove the concept that you can use the Google API to show the distances visually, and that will help the operator make informed decisions. That's a very small micro concern, a focus concern within dispatching, but that is a concept that needs to be proved, because if you build the whole thing around this visual mapping, and it turns out that their real concern was actually about the timing from the origin and not the distance from the destination. And so when you put that proof of concept in front of someone and they use it and they're like, yeah, this doesn't help me. Well, you've just disproven the concept, right? And so these terms are subjective, and different organizations define them differently. But I think conceptually, to me, that's what a proof of concept is.
Yeah.
And as we talk about teams later, alignment on these ideas is important.
Certainly. And so I just want to confirm kind of like what I'm hearing, make sure I got it right. But essentially, a proof of concept is kind of a step along the journey to the MVP.
Absolutely. And again, that keeping that dual track as a business owner, being clear, what are we proving technically? There's lots of things, and especially when we're talking about R&D tax credits and approaching things with a research and development mindset, it's critical to isolate those constraints and to really call out the risks and address them using the appropriate methodology that you can document. On the other side, though, there's just the concept. Are you building something that people will use? How do you validate that soon? How do you iterate through that process? And so, yeah, a proof of concept is very focused, whereas I consider a prototype a broader iteration step.
So is it proof of concept, prototype, MVP, the way that you see it?
Yeah, conceptually. And then I think tracer bullet, steel thread, and MVP. And then they come together in that minimum viable product that really needs to balance the solution with the demand, with the profit, which, like Pablo was saying, may or may not be literal revenue, but at some point, whether you're reducing friction, reducing skills, reducing, man hours, it's going to equal profit. And that MVP has to prove that this problem is solved, that there's demand for that solution, and that solution is financially sustainable.
I think that the takeaway there, whether it is a POC or it's an MVP, these letters, words, it's more about like, you don't have to build a full product. So, I mean, like you should fail cheap, and start like validating engagement super, super early. So that's the main concept here. And then people who is in the audience should take into account.
Let's take a break here.
If you're subscribed to the Beyond the Bottom Line podcast, you've probably noticed the shorter mini episodes that come out alongside with interviews like the one today. These mini-sodes are called Under the Hood. They're candid conversations between Miguel and Ashton, Centurion's Director of Client Experience, where they talk about the real experiences behind their work at the firm. Here's a quick example from a recent episode called Why Fit Matters in Sales.
In our business, one of the things that we had to evolve from is clients had a relationship with you. And you sold us, you promised us the world, and then you would go away. And we kind of had to solve for that. So what do we do now, and how do we think about that at the firm?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've never, no matter what company I'm at, I've never liked the sales to onboarding handoff. Just things can get said differently, or things that the salesperson promised is actually not what we can deliver, or, there's limitations on the onboarding specialist because they don't have all the context and everything that we talked about. They don't know the emotional part of what's important to them. They don't know, what is their core thing that drove us to come here. So it really is like, I just built all this rapport with Ashton. I trust him. He understands everything that I'm going through. And then you introduce him to someone else who has none of that context. It just feels like, you're in the next line of the supply chain. So what we've done now, I would say, it's been like a year now we've been doing this, is anyone that I sell and they sign an engagement letter, I'm going to take them through onboarding. I'm going to be their account manager for the first 6 months. And it makes the onboarding calls just another, hey man, good to see you again. How's it going with your son? Did you win that soccer tournament the other weekend that we talked about? And just starts it off in a really good way. And then, hey, this is Carla, this is Mike, this is whoever, this is your tax advisor. And then they can finally have smart conversations with them. And, that way it really sets the tone. They see that I'm working with them. And I even say it during my sales calls. I'm like, look, I will be your account manager.
Right now, you can find Under the Hood mini-sodes about events, sales, company culture, and much more. It's all right here on the Beyond the Bottom Line podcast feed. Now let's get back to today's discussion.
We've gone through the discovery process. Let's talk a little bit about how you guys are running teams to get this stuff done. Talk to us a little bit about how you think about, staffing the right team for a project once you start building.
I'm definitely going to defer to Pablo on the hiring and the staffing part, but with my role, it's all about orchestration. It's the orchestration of expertise and experience. And so it's looking at every specific project and working with our project management team and with the tech leads to identify what are the particular sets of experiences and skills that we need to bring to bear and when. Because we've developed a really simple but beautiful chart diagram that kind of shows the flow of the timeline of a project and how at different milestones in that project, you need a different set of experts with a different set of experiences to bring their expertise to bear at that time. During discovery, you need people who can be thinking about the broad implications of technology on a business, because we don't like implementing solutions that don't yield business results. So we need to be thinking 10 steps ahead. What will this mean? How will this work? Is there going to be ROI realized on this? Because we want long-term partnerships, we need to make sure that it's an integrated solution that actually delivers results, not just checks the requirement boxes. And then when you're in the middle of a project, you're going to want a different set of expertise who is the detail-oriented engineering team that is able to follow through on the checklists and able to refine and tweak and optimize and really make sure that every nut and bolt is in the right place doing the right thing. And then towards the end, you want that validation pass again for the refinement, the finishing work in carpentry. Same thing exists in software. Taking that pass to do some cleanup from iteration, taking that pass to add some simple refinements, add a screen here, add a drop down, a button. Oh, that's what was missing, right? And so orchestrating that team is the challenge. And to me, that's the fun, exciting part of software development, is identifying whose experience is needed and then orchestrating that lineup so that we can deliver the project on time and on budget.
Talk to me a little bit about some reasons why it's so important to maybe have these variations. Like the front end gets really, really involved at the MVP stage, but not earlier. UI UX is super important early on, I imagine, because of wireframes. Give me a little bit about kind of why these changes are happening around the MVP stage.
Yeah, and this the chart that we are looking at is illustrative, right? It's an example of how most things go. We don't use this prescriptively. We don't use this as a plan of like, this is how everything goes. We have some projects that are more data heavy, that have a lot of data migration needs. And so we will take the time to do project planning and map out who are we going to need to resource to this and why at every stage. We don't believe in just putting an engineer that's well-rounded on every project for the lifespan of the project, because that may or may not fit. Because like you said, when you're ready to launch an MVP, you really need to understand what were the original business objectives and how do we do the quality assurance necessary to ensure that those business objectives are satisfied the way that the original discovery articulated.
I want to chime in here. I think that the most important thing here is know the roles. It's like probably for example, for non-technical founders, they don't need a full-time position for every role, but they need every role. So having the right combination, and in sometimes we're going to be talking about when outsource and when to build in-house teams and so on. But what's important for non-technical founders is like right, they just need to hire the right combination of skills, but they are going to need all the skills. And why QA is not included here is because during the first 4 months until MVP, you need to make a lot of QA. But once you launch, everything should be tested. So the QA had more impact once you launch. And you're going to have to build like pipelines, test automation, a lot of things, involved there. I don't want to go too technical here, but you're going to need more QA later on, and not here in the initial phases,
Let's go to how you guys think about actually, staffing the right team.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the right question is who should execute the plan, So you already have done you already know that you're gonna get probably ROI. You should develop a custom software to automate your process, I think that it's super important to define when it's gonna make sense to outsource, when to build in-house team, and when to build mixed teams. I think that for people who already have SaaS software service founders and so on, probably they already have technical teams internally. So in order to develop innovation, probably they can use some of their unused capacity and allocate them to build new initiatives, and so on. But for non-technical founders, they are not going to know how to hire the right CTO. They don't know how to hire developers. I think that in that case, makes sense to build the team outside. Another question is how to pick the right vendor, right? But I mean, that's going to be another part. That in that case makes a lot of sense to outsource. And one tip here is if you have the chance, you can hire a fractional CTO because sometimes agencies or software companies cannot be your product owner, and they are not going to be talking with your clients, and the business owner by itself doesn't have the time to do that. So in that case, a fractional CTO makes a lot of sense, working and also making an oversight on the development team. And sometimes for people who already have technical platforms, tech platforms, I think that if they are full capacity or whatever, mixing teams makes a lot of sense in those cases, since probably internal teams already have the business knowledge. And when you combine with outsourced teams, I think that that's the best case scenario, the best combinations. For example, they can use the vendor as the engineering muscle, and they can increase people or decrease depending on the stage of the year.
Got it. So a mixed team is you've got both.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got an in-house team, and then you've got a vendor that's also doing development.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct.
You mentioned the fractional CTO. If I'm a non-technical founder on this, I'm like, where do I find one of those? Are they on the corner? Are they on LinkedIn? Where are they?
That's a great question. I think now it's a little bit easier, I think that you draw a bunch of people. We had like a great layoff, in fun companies, so you can get people from Amazon, from Google, from Facebook, Meta, that now they are like a lot of knowledge as CPOs, as CTOs, they were in big projects, I think that out there you can definitely find it through LinkedIn, or there are communities as well, Slack communities. Here in Austin, we're in Austin, and there is an Austin CTO club, so you can find fractions there, but being involved in the tech community, it's super important, so I really believe like everything is a relationship first also.
I think that's the truth. I mean, I think you want to get a referral. Like, I think if you're going to Upwork, and we got creamed on Upwork. Anybody that can design wireframes is like a full stack developer and a CTO as well. So yeah, I think it's super important to get an introduction, and feel free to, if you're a client, you can reach out to me and I'll get you connected to Pablo and his community. Because I've met some of the CTOs that you guys are connected to, and they seem absolutely awesome. And I think it's important for those listening is like understanding kind of the differences between like a fractional CTO and what CodingIT does. Because like, now we're in a journey where, okay, we work with CodingIT to build our product. Well, we now have some needs about how to scale that needs some strategic thinking. Well, now we kind of have a need for a fractional CTO. So I think, can you just say a little bit to distinguish like what fractionals do versus, software dev teams?
Generally, you're going to need like a fractional CTO just to oversight the development team. So probably sometimes we have the two kind of different fractionals. Ones that they are more lean to the technical stuff, so they are more like coders, or they actually execute the coding, and some ones that are more lean to the project management. Depending on that, we allocate a team that is going to support them as well, right? But basically, I think that non-technical founders can hire them in a 10 hours per month retainer, just to oversight what the dev team is doing. It's not an auditor, but it's working like defining the backlog, and also interacting with your clients, taking a little bit more on the product side as well, where the vendor is not going to be able to deep dive, right? So they're going to be on the other side of the table. The fractional CTO can be that bridge where the non-technical founder can be like super focused on his business, right? And generating more revenue and so on, and not talking on how the platform is working.
When it comes to hiring fractional CTOs, one of the things that I like to say is that they need to be able to provide examples of how they translate technical decisions into business implications. And so if you're talking to someone and it's a good fit and it feels like you want to move forward, just ask them that. Say, hey, can you provide some examples of how you've translated technical decisions into business implications? Because that's really at the heart of what a CTO has to do, whether they're technical and they can think that way themselves, or whether they're more on the management side of things and they rely on a tech lead to coach them. They have to own those business implications.
I want to make sure that we cover our case study. I also wanted to ask you, Pablo, thinking about, international teams and time zones, can you share specifically about, CodingIT, not just the considerations, but, how you guys are set up and how you work with clients?
Yeah, I'm gonna go like really quick on there. So I think that the right question also is like how to pick the right vendor. So there are several companies, not just from Latin America, from Asia, but I know around the world. So I think that if you're gonna be in the US, you should pick up a vendor who is in the same time zone. That's key. So you wanna keep the communication fluid in order to find a product. Indeed, in early stage, it's super important. And also you should ask about the hiring process, so the quality of the engineering, it's key as well in order to see what's going to be the outcome. So I think that a couple of takeaways for the audience is like ask, hey, how you're hiring your developers, and trying to detect in that process. I think that there's something super important nowadays is assessing like problem solving skills. This is something that we are doing. We are running assessment on how smart is the people that we're hiring. It's not just about the background. AI is changing a lot, like assessment and technology is changing, is evolving like super fast. So people and developers and software engineers should adapt themselves. I think this apply to every industry, but particularly to us is impacting like a lot. And asking also, understanding a little bit more what are the soft skills that software engineers have. I think that for us, so we really don't believe in sometimes when you sort of software development, it's you have a project manager that sometimes is a bottleneck, so you don't have direct communication with the teams. Having everyone on the same page is super important. So having all the team fluent in English is super important. In our case, we combine onshore teams with nearshore teams, in order to align expectations and to align like business outcomes. But that is basically the most important three things. And the last one is as if they're going to be delivering like every other week or whatever, So you don't have to wait like 4 or 5 months in order to get a product. You should check like every other week what are going to be the deliverables.
Thank you. I was saying, or the dev team should be providing those updates on a weekly basis.
Exactly.
What you guys
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Another tip there is try to be in the same Slack channel, try to be in the same Discord channel, and so on.
Yeah, no, super important. Close that feedback loop. We certainly appreciate that. And I also wanted to highlight that when you choose a vendor, depending on whether they're a US vendor or an international vendor, changes how you claim the tax credit. We're about to get into a case study to kind of bring it all together, how to build product, how to claim the credit. But Ishan, I would be remiss if we skip that point. You share a little about the difference between international contractors that do dev and ones that are based in the US.
Yeah, most definitely. So for the credit, the R&D tax credit is a US based credit. So we focus on onshore staff, contractors, employees. International contractors or teams are excluded from the credit. So it's one thing to keep in mind as you go through, as Pablo mentioned, the vendor selection or process of, choosing your outsourced teams and vendors. It's something to keep in mind. They call it a boots on the ground credits. So only onshore expenses and staff and personnel are included for the credit.
That's a really good point. So typically we want to work, if we want to maximize the credit, we want to find US based vendors. Let's move into our case study, guys. I think we're ready for it. Let's talk a little bit about a client that you guys work with. Pablo, Chester, take it away.
Absolutely. I can take that. I think that this is one. So I think that we can cover like both sides, how we have built a platform and also how they were able to recover the R&D tax credit, how they were able to claim that. This particular client is an event management company. When they came to us, they came from a failed experience. So probably 50% of our clients comes from failed experience. Sometimes it's Dyson, sometimes it's like lack of communication, sometimes it's not getting the business outcomes. But anyways, they came to us. They were organizing events nationwide. So they had like thousands of brand ambassadors around the US, so they were handling like everything through a spreadsheet again. So I think that if you're having like 5, 6 spreadsheets, to solve your processes and you're using SaaS platforms, probably you need a custom software development there that support your processes. In this particular case, they were doing they were using like Google Forms in order to get the profiles from these ambassadors, making the approval process through the spreadsheet, so it was super complex for them. And in every event, they were like calling ambassadors, making sure that they were there and so on. So what we did there is like, we cannot build like an entire platform to solve like everything. So first, as we were talking before, we tried to build just an unified place where we could have all the profiles. and validate the engagement with all the thousands of ambassadors that they had. So we did just an admin, and after that, they were able to complete the profile. After that, we had like thousands of people using that small proof of concept. That was not an MVP. That was a proof of concept. This is a real example. The platform was not usable at that point, but we validated the engagement from thousands of people. What happened next, we allowed the platform, the admins, to create the event through the platform. So what happened there, they were opening events, thousands of ambassadors for example, in New York City or in San Francisco, whatever they were opening that event, were able to receive the notifications to apply to that event based on the profiles that they completed before. So what happened there is like they started like creating like multiple events at the same time where everyone was able to apply. They filter that, they accept like everything, and they set up everything through the platform. That was exactly what they wanted, So, but what happened next, So I think that this is the beauty of software development, So once we understood their business model and how we could add value, we're starting like asking, hey, how you're paying these people, these 1,000 of people nationwide? And what they said is like, hey, I'm calculating an hourly rate that they have, for example, in an event where we're gonna be in a booth for in a conference or whatever, Exactly. So what we did is like added a QR code, on site, so these ambassadors can check in and check out through the platform. And next, we made an integration with Beam to make all the payouts, all the payrolls, So it impacted the financial area for this company as well. And all the administration process was like running like super efficiently, So we didn't think about that when we started the product. But doing these ongoing discovery phases, allow us to understand and start like continuing adding value. After that, we did like a QuickBooks integration to send invoice to the clients and so on. And we're working with an entire team with them now, So that's a super successful story. I think that after a year, I recommended them, hey, you're investing a lot in software development, you are adding innovation to your company. I think that you should talk with tax hack, in order to see if you can claim this R&D tax credit. I don't know that part, but I think that Ishan, you, Miguel, you can deep dive more on that.
Yeah, let's talk about how we turn development into dollars, Ishan.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, everything you just mentioned, Pablo, from that ideation to, finding the pain points all the way to deploying that first solution, and then even the ongoing refinements and discovery that you're continuing now, all that qualifies for the credit. I know we talked before about documentation and all the things that you and your team generate. All of that is extremely helpful, and things that we looked at and collected during the R&D tax credit process for this example. And just from a numbers perspective, all of the spend from the activities you were just talking about, we were able to realize almost a $30,000 federal tax credit for this client. So we're not talking about a couple dollars here. It was a significant benefit back to the client just from the software development and the technology process that they were already going to do. So this was kind of just an added benefit, right? They got the technology and the solution they were looking for from you and your team, but just from that, they were able to actually even claim a credit and just add, another financial benefit from this software development that they undertook.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that I think the way that we do the R&D analysis with the time-based surveys allows us to get a bigger credit. And what I mean by that is, sure, the amount of money that you're directly spending in development is going to be calculated into the R&D tax credit. What also is going to be included is all the time that the stakeholders within the company, the business leaders, the CEO, people that are establishing those processes in order to hand them over as, to the dev team. All this time can be included in the R&D tax credit as well. So you have people that aren't technical that because they spend time, part of their W-2 salary can now be included for the R&D tax credit. So we can often, going through our process, we can often expand what qualifies. We expand the qualifying costs.
I just wanted to add like one more thing that I think that's super useful in our case for our clients. And it's that R&D tax credit, you can claim like every year. So it's not just one shot when you develop software. You're going to claim like in 2025, in 2026, and you're going to continue adding technology, and you're going to be able to claim those credits. So you don't have to see just this $30K a year. This is a lot of money. But I mean, like eventually in 4 or 5 years, it's going to be 100K, 150K, it's going to be a lot of money, when you see compound all the investment that you have done in the company, and also the asset that you have added to your balance sheet.
Yeah, definitely. And Ishan, can you touch on that a little bit, like going backwards, going forwards?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and this is one of the most common misconceptions that we see, right? You can only take the credit for 1 year, which is not true. You can continue to take it so long as you're going through some sort of software development or R&D technology advancement. You can also go back 3 years to claim the credits for tax years that you never claimed it. So, you're looking at 3 years back as well as, several years forward. So it could end up just being $90,000, for example, for the prior 3 years that you did claim the credit, which, you're already able to save a lot of money for investment that you've already made on technology and software development. Other things that we typically see are, the company is too small. There's not enough spend. Well, even if there is just a little bit of spend on software development, right, that still results in credit. And our goal is to come up with some sort of estimate or ballpark to help, determine if that's materially enough. But there's never a company that's too small. And I think that's a decision that we help founders or CTOs, make. Some other, common ones are, you didn't just create something brand new to the world. Well, it doesn't have to be brand new. We're not looking for the cure for cancer, right? We're looking for software development, technology advancement, and all the stuff that Chester and Pablo mentioned. Those are qualifying activities for credit. And then one of the other ones is using off-the-shelf solutions, right? When you use off-the-shelf solutions, that may not qualify for the credit, but a lot of times those solutions don't fit your business requirements, and then you have to go through some custom software development on top to meet the specific needs of the business or the operation. So those would be qualifying activities, all those customizations to off-the-shelf solutions or platforms. So those are just a couple, misconceptions and things we typically see or responses we see from clients.
Yeah, what I love doing is helping businesses understand that the uncertainties and constraints that they face, that constitutes the need for research and development as they're trying to improve specific business components. And so the particular way that that's solved or addressed isn't necessarily what makes it innovative, right? It really is about identifying those specific combination of uncertainties and constraints for your business. And that helps us as software developers hone in on it. And that helps you guys hone in on where those tax credits can apply.
That's exactly right. I mean, those are the key words, and it's great hearing the tax credit guy say the same phrase, our dev guy say the same phrase, but that's exactly what's in the code is when you solve for uncertainty, you are now in a place where you qualify for the tax credit. So, if you're identifying those gaps in the business, taking steps to use technology to fill those gaps, you're already in the tax credit space. And it's just, I think, important to note too that the code requires a use of science. Obviously we get that in dev with computer science, but there's certainly, I think, expansive ways to take non-software projects and qualify for them for the R&D tax credit. I just want to mention that, even though it's outside of the scope of this conversation. Well, guys, this has been very valuable. Even though we built this together, I've been learning here. If you saw me kind of think for a second, it's because, Chester, Pablo, you said something that stuck with me. So thank you guys. I want to give you guys the floor on closing thoughts. And I'd love to hear a little bit for those listening of, how to reach out and work with you. So please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say a few words and hand it off to Pablo. the companies that thrive are not the ones with the most technology or even the latest technology. They're the ones with the clearest mental model of their own business, and they use technology to codify or create actual business assets that encapsulate what already works. And by doing that, they free their resources, their time, and their focus up to continue to adapt as culture and technology and economics shift and affect their business. And so as we pursue creating the tools and helping you refine the processes and implementing the automations, it's about us understanding the essence of your business and you understanding the implications of your technology choices as they're woven into the fabric of your business.
So I want to say, like, whether you are already building tools or you're planning to do it, I think that you should get advice first, so try to build with tech mindset, so you're going to need like to talk with the tech people and also from the R&D, so build with an R&D mindset first. Having a call with you guys, I think that it could be like super useful for everyone and understand first if they're going to be able to claim the tax credit and so on.
I just want to just reiterate that get advice first portion, right? I think it's important because when you're starting a business or looking to build technology, I think we oftentimes jump to, I want to use this software platform because it's the newest, or I want to use this platform because it has AI. And then you come, to the table with disparate tools and disparate systems without getting that advice first. I think it creates a lot of issues having to backtrack out of those, platforms and systems, just jumping to conclusions too quickly.
Yeah, I think speaking from personal experience, I mean, as someone that doesn't have a technical background, finding the right partner was the difference between building a product that we can say we just built a product or having a product that we actually use in our business that makes us more efficient. I enjoy working with you guys and excited that you were able to share some very interesting things with our audience here. Thank you for joining this episode. To make this conversation more actionable, I encourage you to write down 1 or 2 things that you took away. And if you want to connect with me, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, where I'm fairly active. Look for Miguel Alexander Centeno. And if you found value in this show, please subscribe on whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts. And stick around for the next show. What you learn might change your business.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Bottom Line. This podcast is brought to you by Centurion Firm, bringing you Fortune 500 tools and strategies to help small businesses and other organizations with tax, accounting, and technology implementation that maximize cash flow and long-term value. Learn more at centurionfirm.com.